Good morning and welcome back to the 5 Acre Woods. As promised, we're making our second video, and this one is on harvesting the worm castings. I'll do a short review of what we have here, and then we'll get right to the harvesting. We have a three bin tier. On our last video, we showed you how to set those up, and you can see that on that video. We use a grid system when we feed our worms. That's right here. We actually have the numbers on the lid, and each week we feed our worms in a different area so that the worms move through the bin. Now, in our first bin, the worms stayed for 6 weeks, like on the grid, and then we built the second bin, and we put that right on top of this bin, with the theory that the worms would migrate up into the next bin, and this bin would then be left with all the worm castings. Now, as usual, we do have some stragglers that are still left in this bin. That was 3 weeks ago that we moved, that the worms started to move up. So what we're going to do today is remove this top bin, and we're going to begin to separate the worms from the worm castings that are left. And then we'll screen the worm castings so that they're very refined. Okay, we're ready to harvest or begin harvesting. And my granddaughter, Caitlin, and I are going to be now trying to separate the larger worms from all of these worm castings. That is the result of 9 weeks of our worms going through kitchen waste, shredded newspaper, some leaves, things like that. Caitlin, can you hand me the shovel? We're going to put a little bit of the castings out on this tray. You can here. I think I'll use my hand. That might make it a little better. And we're just going to start with a small amount. Okay, that's 9 weeks worth of worm castings. So we're going to make what we're going to do is kind of make a pile here, like this. And the theory is that the worms will all go towards the center of the pile because they don't like the sunlight. They don't like light. And we're just going to start like very easily doing this. And as we find a large worm, we're going to put them in this little bowl so we can return them to the other bin. Over here, we have our screenings, and while Caitlin is starting to do this, I'll explain about the screenings. We have a larger screening that's a 1/4 inch for catching any large worms that we miss, and that'll be the first screening. And then we have this basket that we actually got the idea from someone else on YouTube. It's really a very fine screening, and this will catch our baby worms and our eggs. We know that some might get through, but we're really trying to salvage the eggs so that our worms will continue to multiply. Now, as we just kind of go through this a little bit, it's very clumpy, but that should come out. Have we found any big worms yet?
Mm-mm. I found one little tiny one.
Sometimes the paper, just wad it up, and I'm going to, okay, there we go, there's a big one. I'm going to put that back in the bin, there, and that little, get him out of there. And what we'll do is just everything that doesn't have worms in it, we'll put right over here and just start making another pile.
Is this one big enough?
Sure, any ones that you find. These are the stragglers that didn't move up through the holes in the bottom of the first bin. And the reason that that's one of the reasons that we put holes in the bottom of the bins, is so that the worms will migrate up to the next bin where you begin feeding them for the next 6 weeks. So this system has worked very well, actually. As you see, we're really not finding that many worms in here, which means that most of them have moved up into that next bin. Okay, this is the pile that we ended up with from the small amount that we took out of the bin. We do still have quite a few castings left in the bin, which I'm going to finish later. But for this video, we're just going to work with this. Caitlin has removed all the large worms. How many did we find?
I am not sure. We found about. Do you want me to pull them out?
No, just an approximate number.
Found about maybe 6 or 5.
Okay. Those worms will get put back in the bin. And now, Caitlin, can you hand me the larger screen and the bin? This is the bin that's going to catch our castings as we put them in. And you want to put a shovelful in there, and I'll put some in too. Now, some of the mistakes that we made was, that's probably enough for now, and then we're just gonna do this. And oh, there's another worm that got through. So that's why we screen, so that we're not, so the worms aren't getting into the castings, the final product. One of the mistakes I think I made was I put a lot of shredded paper in the first bin, and what we're finding is that it got very clumpy and it didn't break down. Now maybe had we left it in there for many more months it would have, but I think from now on for my main bedding I'm going to be using leaves and just potting soil and maybe a little peat moss to avoid that clumping. And I also had seen where you can use some of your mail, and I believe that maybe some envelopes probably got in my shreddings and some of the plastic got through, and we're finding a little bit of that here and there. So we're not going to be doing any of that either. We would like these farms to be as efficient as possible, so we want to avoid things that aren't composting down quickly, and also anything that could be harmful to our worms. So we finished putting the worm castings through the larger screen, and the little bit that we did produced this worm castings, which are much finer now, if you can see them. Now we're going to put them through this really fine screen to catch any eggs and to refine it even more. So, Caitlin, do you want to hold that? And I will dump all of this in there, or some of it. Well, I guess I better dump all of it in. Oh, don't need to get you full of dirt here. Now let me just get as much out of here as we can without. Okay, so now I'm going to give that a shake over top of this. Just kind of, I find that the easiest way to do this is just kind of let it go down like this and then take it back like that, and it'll begin to filter through. It'll catch any baby worms, and it'll catch the eggs, so that
there's a lot of videos.
they won't end up in the final product of the worm castings. Some will get through, but we're going to use these in our plantings and our garden, and we really don't want the red wigglers to be in our garden. They don't do as well in that environment because they eat. We can do this too. They eat decomposed organic material, and unless we had a lot of leaves and things like that we were throwing in our garden all the time, they may not get enough to eat. And so we're going to try to keep as many in the bins as possible and just let this go through real well. Get it nice and refined, and we'll show you the end product in just a few minutes. And now we're going to take a look at the bins that all the worms are in right now, just to show you the progress that they have made in the 3 weeks that they have been in there. We changed the bedding to mostly leaves and some potting soil and a little bit of peat moss. So that's an experiment. We're going to see how all that's going. We don't bother our worms too much. We feed them once a week. We check on them once a week, and that's it. Okay, here's the worm bin that we made 3 weeks ago. We thought we'd show you the progress. We have some leaves and shredded paper in here. We've been feeding the worms in the same grid pattern. We're on week 3. And if we pull back some of this, you might be able to see some of the worms. When we take the lid off, they tend to dive deep. So sometimes you can't see them very well. Caitlin is going to come over and put the worms in that we found in bin 1. So you can just dump them right in, Caitlin, and they will find their own way down, and they'll find some food to munch on and hopefully create lots of worm castings for us. This is some of the final product that we ended up with after screening it through the fine screen. As you can see, it's much finer than the clumpy dirt that we started out with. No worms in this whatsoever.
Here's the difference.
It is a little labor intensive, and we are going to be trying to get better at this, but until we do, we think this is the best way to do it. If you want to learn more about how to make a worm bin similar to ours, please view our other YouTube video, which will be linked in the description below. And we hope to see you soon back here at the 5 Acre Woods. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.
Bye.